She had only made a minor parking mistake, a moment of absent-mindedness on her way home from a long day at work. The simple shirt she wore could not hide her fatigue, but that was not the reason she became a target. Yet, the woman was met with immediate hostility from the patrol officer. No greetings, just bossiness and accusatory questions. She tried to remain calm, to explain herself professionally, but her calmness only seemed to irritate the powerful man. The woman stood there, on the side of a deserted road, subjected to a barrage of words designed to degrade her based on her skin color, her gender, criticisms about the car she drove, the clothes she wore, sarcastic insults about her abilities and intelligence. When she, with a final burst of courage, asked the policeman to stop his inappropriate behavior and give his name, that was when the final limit was broken. And then the unthinkable happened. Right in the middle of the street, under the newly turned-on street lights, the policeman's hand swung up. A slap echoed through the air. The woman felt her cheeks burning, her head spinning. She had been attacked, assaulted by the very person whose job it was to protect citizens. Not stopping there, she was falsely accused of being an attacker, of resisting, treated like a dangerous criminal, handcuffed roughly, her wrists aching from the tight metal cuffs, shoved into the back seat of a patrol car in humiliation. The policeman, in his blind gloating, had no idea who he had just messed with. He had no idea that the slap, the handcuffs, the insults were not only a serious crime, but also the grave of his own career and future. He had no idea that the woman in the plain shirt held a secret, a position that could shake the entire police department. What truths will be revealed at the police station? What shocks await the policeman, and what will be the ultimate price for his actions? What dark past will be dug up? Let's follow this dramatic and infuriating story together. Dusk was beginning to paint the city sky purple and orange as Clara Thompson drove her familiar silver Honda Accord sedan through the quieter streets of the suburbs. A long day at the office had drained her meetings, reports, brain-numbing decisions. Now the black woman in her 40s, with her sharp mind and calm exterior, just wanted to go home, to shed her work clothes, a simple blouse and black slacks, and relax. She turned onto a side street with little traffic, intending to take a shortcut home. When she reached a four-way stop sign, the road was completely deserted, not a car in sight. She slowed down, looked carefully both ways, and slowly rolled the car through the intersection. She might have stopped, but certainly not for the rigid 3 seconds required. A minor infraction, not dangerous to anyone under the circumstances. Her mind was still preoccupied with the details of the complicated case she had handled that day, but she didn't know that right behind her car, a local police patrol car had just pulled up. The driver was Officer Mark Evans, a white man in his 40s, his face scowling and tired after a not-so-successful day at work. He clearly saw the rolling stop of the Honda Accord in front of him. Normally, for such a small mistake on this deserted stretch of road, he might just flash his lights or even ignore it. But today was different. He saw that the driver was a black woman, dressed neatly. An unfounded annoyance, a hidden prejudice, and perhaps the accumulated frustration of the day made Evans decide to stop this car. This was his chance to show his power, to correct someone he considered unlawful. Evans immediately turned on his red and blue roof lights, followed by a short but powerful siren. Clara glanced at the rearview mirror and sighed. She knew she probably hadn't stopped long enough. She calmly turned on her lights, slowly pulled over to the side of the road, and stopped. She rolled down the driver's window halfway, turned off the radio, and waited. Officer Evans stepped out of the patrol car, his gait heavy and his demeanor unfriendly. He walked straight to Clara's car door. "Is that four-way stop sign for show?" Evans said without a greeting, his tone rude and accusatory from the start. "Or are your eyesight failing you to see such a big sign?" Clara turned to look at the officer, trying to keep her cool under the pressure. "Hello, officer," she replied, her voice even and professional. "I stopped at the sign, maybe not long enough by your standards, but I made sure there were no other vehicles, and I passed through safely." Clara's calm, logical response seemed to irritate Evans even more. "Safe? You think you're the one who decides what's safe?" he snapped. Stop, no talking. The law is the law. Don't you dare argue. Show me your license and registration," he practically shouted, holding out his hand for the papers with a patronizing look on his face. Clara Thompson suppressed a sigh. She had seen too many people like Officer Evans in her years of service, people who felt empowered by their uniforms and who were easily swayed by their personal prejudices. Though she wanted to react more forcefully, experience and discipline told her to stay calm and comply with the initial request. She quietly took her driver's license and registration from her purse and handed them to Evans through the window. Evans snatched the papers, glanced at the name Clara Thompson and the address, then looked back up at her with a critical eye, appraising her from head to toe. He looked at the plain shirt and the business slacks, then at the interior of the Honda Accord, which was neither new nor old. He seemed to be searching for some sign that would confirm his preconceived notions. Clara Thompson. He muttered the name, then smirked. So, driver, but clueless about the rules. He began to make condescending comments, his tone filled with contempt. Is this license also bought or obtained, or is it a newbie? He continued, his tone becoming increasingly sarcastic and racially charged. What the hell are you doing in this neighborhood at this hour? This is a neighborhood full of decent white people, not a place for someone like you to hang around. Are you trying to get into some shady business? The innuendos and malice continued to pour out, directed at her skin color and her presence in the area. Clara felt her blood rush to her head. This insult had gone beyond a simple traffic stop. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice from shaking with anger. Officer, she said, her voice steady but noticeably colder, with an unwavering firmness. The attitude and language you are using are completely unacceptable for a police officer on duty. You have no right to make baseless assumptions or derogatory remarks based on my race or any other personal characteristic. She looked Evans straight in the eye. May I have your name and badge number? Officer Evans felt deeply insulted by the black woman. He was trying to educate, questioning his attitude and asking for personal information. His pride in his police authority was being openly challenged. The anger he had been suppressing exploded. What are you asking my name for? Are you trying to sue me? Evans snapped, his voice becoming more obsequious and hostile. He moved closer to the car door, almost pressing his face against Clara's. I'm telling you, I'm a cop. I have the right to stop you. I have the right to ask you anything I want. And you have no right to ask me back. Understand? Then he began to curse even more viciously. The kind of dirty words that people only dare to use in the darkest places, words that degrade people based on their skin color, questioning women's morality and intelligence. He was like a madman, taking out all his anger and prejudice on the helpless woman sitting in the car. Clara clenched her hands, her nails digging into her palms. She knew the situation was getting dangerous. Officer, she tried again, her voice still eerily calm. I'm warning you one last time. This behavior of yours constitutes a serious abuse of power and harassment of citizens. I demand that you stop immediately and call your supervisor here to handle it. The request to call the supervisor, a perfectly legitimate and legal request, became the final straw that broke the camel's back in Officer Evans's blind rage. Call the supervisor. Who do you think you are to order me around? Officer Evans roared, his face red with rage, his eyes blazing with cruelty. He felt utterly humiliated. The request to call a superior was, to him, an unforgivable challenge, a disregard for the absolute authority he assumed he had when he wore the uniform. Reason was completely clouded by blind rage. In a moment of complete and utter loss of control, which no one could have expected, Evans raised his rough hand. A dry, harsh sound rang out in the quiet of the evening. Evans's hand had landed hard on Clara Thompson's left cheek. The sudden, brutal slap stunned Clara. Her head jerked to the side with the force. A searing hot pain spread across her jaw and cheek. The world went black for a moment. Shock and fury flashed in her eyes as she turned to look at her attacker. Red finger marks quickly appeared on her dark skin, a mark of violence and humiliation. Evans may have had a moment of realization of the horror of his actions, but instead of stopping, his warped self-preservation and fear of retribution only made him more aggressive. In order to cover up, he had to turn the victim into the perpetrator. See, Evans shouted irrationally, pointing at Clara. Are you going to attack me again? You resisted a law enforcement officer. He created a completely false scenario to justify his violent behavior. You are under arrest, he roared. Get out of the car, rebel. Evans yanked open the driver's door. He grabbed Clara's arm and roughly dragged her out of the car. Clara, though hurt and angry, kept to the principle of not physically resisting to avoid being charged with another crime, but her eyes were cold and hateful as she stared at Evans, as if to burn the image of this abuser into her mind. "I'll show you how dare you insult the police," Evans cursed under his breath as he twisted Clara's arms behind her back. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs and locked them around her wrists, squeezing so hard that the cold metal dug into her flesh. Once he had handcuffed the resisting person, Evans shoved Clara toward his patrol car. He opened the back door, forced her head down, and pushed her mercilessly into the hard, cramped seat. The door slammed shut behind her. Evans leaned against the patrol car, panting with anger and perhaps a sick excitement. He looked through the window at Clara, who sat silently in the car, with a triumphant, gloating look on his face. He believed he had successfully cursed a stubborn black woman who had dared to challenge his authority. He took out his radio and began reporting the arrest, painting the story in his favor. He had no idea that the slap and the handcuffs were not only illegal, but also self-destructive to his own future. Officer Mark Evans drove his patrol car back to the local police station, still angry, but also full of satisfaction. He had dealt with that stubborn black woman, had shown her who had the power here. He glanced at the woman sitting silently in the back seat through the rearview mirror, seeing that she still had a cold expression on her face, not a single tear or plea, which made him even more annoyed and contemptuous. When they arrived at the station, Evans escorted Clara Thompson into the check-in area. Still with the same patronizing attitude, he reported to the officer on duty, a tired-looking man named Peterson. "Peterson, I just caught this subject resisting, causing a disturbance. Aggressive attitude. She tried to attack me when I checked her papers." Evans calmly made up the story, confident that the word of a police officer would always be trusted. Sergeant Peterson sighed, looking at the handcuffed black woman standing before him. She was dressed modestly, but her shirt was a little disheveled, and there was a noticeable red mark on her left cheek. He began the usual detention procedure, taking identification, taking a photo, taking fingerprints. Clara cooperated quietly, giving her name, age, and address clearly and accurately. Her uncanny composure, even when handcuffed and with a wound on her face, surprised Sergeant Peterson a little, and he began to sense that something was not quite right with what Evans had reported. Evans remained nearby, arms folded, watching with a smug look. After taking the basic information, Sergeant Peterson asked about the occupation section to complete the profile. "What is your occupation and place of work?" It was the moment when the veil of mystery was finally lifted. Clara raised her head, her cold eyes looking straight at Officer Evans, who was standing nearby with a smirk. Then she turned to Sergeant Peterson, her voice calm, clear, without a trace of hesitation, but containing a weight that could not be underestimated. "Supervisory Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The two words FBI echoed through the check-in room like a thunderclap. Sergeant Peterson froze, his typing fingers froze. FBI Supervisory Special Agent. He knew that was a high command rank in the FBI. He stared at Clara, then back at the information on the screen, then back at the red rash on her cheek. Cold sweat began to run down his spine. He knew he and the entire station were in deep trouble. But Sergeant Peterson's reaction was mere confusion compared to the nightmare that had just befallen Officer Mark Evans. Evans's ears pricked at the three powerful letters, FBI. The woman in the plain shirt, the one he had just insulted with the vilest of words, the one he had just slapped in the face, handcuffed, and arrested for a traffic stop, was a supervisory agent of the FBI. No, impossible. It was unthinkable. All the smugness, all the aggression, all the glee vanished in an instant. In its place was pure terror, a paralyzing fear that took over his entire mind and body. Evans's face was deathly white, his eyes staring at Clara, unblinking, his mouth agape, unable to form words. He realized he had caused a disaster. He had attacked a high-ranking federal agent. His career, his freedom, everything he had was about to go up in smoke. Evans's limbs began to shake uncontrollably. He staggered back a few steps, almost falling backwards, if it weren't for the wall behind him. Agent Thompson, Evans stuttered, his voice trembling, almost inaudible. He hurriedly approached, but did not dare to get too close, his eyes filled with pleading and extreme fear. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I really didn't know who you were. This was just a terrible misunderstanding. I was so nervous. I lost control. He began to pour out a vile plea, trying feebly to justify his actions. Please forgive me, Agent. Please don't report this. My life's work, my family, my wife and children, please. He almost knelt down, but his trembling legs wouldn't allow it. Clara Thompson remained stoic, showing no sign of softening at her attacker's pleas. She simply looked at Evans with a piercing gaze, then turned to Sergeant Peterson, who was still frozen. I need to make a call, she said, her voice calm and authoritative. Sergeant Peterson was startled and nodded quickly. Yes, Agent, please. He pointed to the landline phone and, at the same time, furtively signaled another officer to quickly report the emergency situation to the station commander. Clara walked to the phone and dialed a special FBI extension number she knew by heart. When the other end answered, she gave a brief, precise report of the situation. This is Supervisory Special Agent Clara Thompson. I am being held without warrant at the police department by Officer Mark Evans. Call number 1,195,783. Request immediate assistance and notify the special branch. The call ended quickly, but the weight of it was enough to shake the local police station. Supervisory Special Agent Clara Thompson's call triggered a swift and extremely serious response from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In an astonishingly short amount of time, several unmarked black FBI sedans pulled up in front of the police station. The FBI agents, dressed in plain clothes but with a professional, assertive air, quickly walked inside, led by the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the local office. At the same time, the local police chief and other senior officers had also received the urgent news and were present at the station in a panic. The atmosphere became extremely tense. The simultaneous appearance of senior FBI officials made everyone in the station, especially Sergeant Peterson and Officer Mark Evans, feel heavy pressure. After being received and secured by her FBI colleagues, Clara Thompson presented the entire incident in detail and objectively to the FBI leadership and the local police chief. She did not exaggerate, simply recounting the truth of the abuse of power, discrimination, insults, slaps, and illegal arrest that she suffered from Officer Evans. Faced with the living evidence of a high-ranking FBI agent being assaulted and the severity of the incident being undeniable, the local police chief had no choice but to take drastic action. He immediately placed Officer Mark Evans on indefinite leave of absence. Evans was stripped of his weapon and badge and taken in for private questioning by FBI agents. A formal interagency investigation was established, involving the local police department's Internal Affairs Division, which operates under the close supervision of the FBI and the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The goal was not only to clarify the incident with Agent Thompson, but also to review Officer Evans's entire work history. And that's when Evans's dark past came to light. Investigators pored over every file, scrutinizing every complaint, every use of force report, every performance review. They discovered an alarming pattern. Evans had a history of using excessive force, especially against minority subjects. He had been repeatedly complained about by citizens for his bossy demeanor, racist rhetoric, and unprofessional behavior. Yet, these incidents had often been handled lightly, with cursory reprimands or dismissed due to lack of evidence or internal cover-ups. The incident with Agent Thompson was the culmination of a long string of misconduct that went unchecked. With the undeniable evidence from the attack on Agent Thompson and his tainted past record cleared up, Officer Mark Evans's end was inevitable. After the investigation was over, he was permanently fired from the police force, ending his career in disgrace. But the fallout didn't stop there. Because of the serious nature of the incident, the assault and violation of civil rights by a federal agent while on duty, the U.S. Department of Justice decided to bring criminal charges against Mark Evans. He faced serious federal charges, violating civil rights under color of law, including assault and false imprisonment. Evans's federal trial attracted a great deal of attention. The prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including Agent Thompson's testimony and Evans's criminal history. Evans failed to present a convincing defense. Ultimately, The court rendered a fair verdict. The federal judge highlighted the betrayal of public trust, the dangers of racial bias and uncontrolled violence in police forces, and the need for a severe sentence. To set an example, Officer Mark Evans was convicted and sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. The harsh sentence sent a strong message that no one, regardless of the badge, is above the law. Abuse of power and racism will be met with a heavy price. It also exposed gaps in the police's internal oversight and disciplinary system, prompting calls for further reform. For Clara Thompson, justice had been served. The painful experience, while scarring, only strengthened her resolve to fight for fairness and integrity, not only in her work as an FBI agent, but also as a citizen. The simple shirt she wore that day became an unwitting witness to a confrontation with prejudice and abuse of power, and ultimately, a symbol of justice triumphing. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.